welcome everyone to downtime. At least is what it's called right now. Thank you, thank you for joining us. Lance, how are you?
I'm not doing badly. It's been a long day.
Yeah. I was gonna do this. You were explaining earlier.
I'm looking particularly cool.
Yep. Your future
cool shades.
Your future is so bright. So I had
my eyes dilated earlier today, so that's why I put them on. So
a couple of things: new mic, new camera. It took 2 days to get the system configured with all this stuff, and I'm still not sure it's working. It's a really nice camera, but the bandwidth that it much more than my system could handle, at least more than the cables and the USB hub could handle. So I had to rewind. It's been a nightmare. But it looks like everyone can hear me, so that's good. So thank you all for joining us. And then let's see. Oh, there was one or two other announcements. We are, as everyone knows, we're splitting the channel, and there's going to be a lot of changes coming up. We're gonna have a patron meeting, discuss it with the members and stuff like that. It's all going to be good stuff. I think it's going to be awesome. So I always get a little nervous. People say, "Oh, I'm really excited about all these changes," and then you find out it's really terrible stuff, and they're just making it up. No, this is going to be good. So and we appreciate everybody who has been supportive and helping with the new Overtime channel. We're going to be doing content on both of those at the same time. I think it's going to work out really well, and it's going to help A, with the algorithm, which is always nice, and B, with getting struck. If the news gets struck, that's one channel that is down, but the other one can still stream. So a lot of reasons to do that. Come join us on the Discord. We'll be talking about it there. We'll be talking about it at the next patron meeting. And I don't know. I guess that's about it. So we've got Operator Starsky tomorrow, which I think is going to be good. Are you going to be able to join us for that, Lance, do you think?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So, the beard is back. I don't know if you saw me without the beard. Did you?
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah.
It was a shocking thing. I'm glad it's a thing of the past now.
It's. I've been getting. 𝗬𝗲𝗆 was just like, no, you got to keep it. You got to keep the thing off. So it's. I've been getting. The girls loved it. The girls were just like, "Oh my god!" My daughter just kept rubbing her face on mine. I was just like, "Can I help you?" I'd just be sitting here. She'd walk in, wouldn't even say anything, and just start rubbing her cheek against my face. It was just like, in some cultures that's considered rude. Yeah, it was very cute. She does it just because she likes to be quirky sometimes. So Anyway, so between
I've never grown a beard.
No.
No, the closest I tried growing a mustache once because everybody on the ship was doing it, and it was kind of a thing. And after about 2 weeks, all I looked like was David Niven with one of those tiny, just tip of the upper part of your lip, and I looked just ridiculous. I said, "No, I think I can live without this."
I just grew it because I figured I wanted to see what it looked like with one. I was just like, guys can grow one if they want to. So I said, okay, why not? Give it a shot, and then kept it for, So, oh dear Lord, I already lost my train of thought. Oh, what the hell? Okay, yeah, I'm out of it. The other thing was the Martin Luther King video, which I am really proud of. I like that video a lot, and
yes.
Did you catch it?
I watched about half of it before I had to go off on yet another errand with my dad.
Very, very pleased with it, and but took between the scripting and the video editing took a tremendous amount of time. But I like the nick of times, and I want to do more of that. And we're going to be that's one of the other things we're going to be doing is more pre-recorded content like that. So I'm looking forward to that. But between that and the camera and all that other stuff, I have not had the time to keep up with it. So I'm glad you're going to be there with Starsky, because I was saying if Putin decided to like conquer my local Starbucks, I wouldn't know about it right now. I'm just like one bloodshot. So good. It's good that you're going to be there. Thank you for that.
The only redeeming feature there is I'm not sure he'd know about it either.
Well, Or they tell them that they conquered the star.
It's like watching a bunch of guys dressed in Bozo the Clown outfits in a blacked out room bumping into one another as they're all trying to find the exit.
So as a former commander in the U.S. Navy, having staged the Iraq War, I need your expertise on this question. Do you think that Russia has enough military power to actually take and hold a Starbucks?
Depends on which one of the baristas is on duty that morning.
Okay, so if the barista's armed with something like a couple of pens and maybe a paperclip, they've got a shot.
I don't know, one of those whipped cream dispensers. You're in big trouble, dude.
Yeah, those. Or they can start hurling some of those. What is it? Those scones or those are thick scones,
Ooh.
man. I imagine one of those bounces off your cranium, and yeah. Oh dear Lord, it's. I always feel I get ambivalent about making fun of these things, but it's laugh or cry.
Yeah.
Oh God! So you had suggested. I like this. Talking about our favorite books. I think you had said sci-fi books, and I my favorite book probably is in fact a sci-fi.
Sci-fi, but
yeah, well, okay, all right. So what's your favorite book?
If you went for the book I have read and reread the most times, it would have to be Tolkien's trilogy.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, for a while there, and when I say a while, a period of perhaps 12 to 15 years, I reread the whole thing cover to cover, including footnotes, every year.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm impressed. I'm not a very good judge of how long it takes to read things because I'm dyslexic, so it takes me a very long time. And I've gotten so if I concentrate, I really can read. But I have to concentrate. I have to really. If you see me like reading the news, it's like I am just laser focused. And if I lose my concentration for a second, all of a sudden I can't read it anymore. But so I don't. But it sounds. I mean, I think to read the whole trilogy, I think it'd take an entire year.
Oh no, it's not that bad. I think my record for getting through it was like a week.
Really?
That wasn't dedicated reading. Yeah, that wasn't dedicated reading. It was just, reading a lot. When I get a really good book, I literally falls into the category of can't put it down, and I'll be up all night until I finish reading it. So I'll get through a fairly sizable tome within a day and a half.
So I think for me, my two favorites. I actually happen to have one of my favorites here. It's this one right here. I love this one. It's called The Water Thief. Let's see. It was Kirkus said profound, sure to spark a reaction, scathing, ceaselessly engaging. Clarion said it was a brilliant rebuttal of Atlas Shrugged. Midwest Book Review said a powerful saga that deserves to be in every school and debated by any who question authority and the elements of freedom in society. Midwest Book Review. So, one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, it's a really good book.
You read it?
Yeah.
Oh, I think you had told me that you had read it. I don't know. Why did I don't even know. Yes.
Fairly long ago, so I don't remember a lot of the details. I do remember that I was impressed with it enough to keep it in my collection.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, for
you're making me go, maybe I should get that one down and reread
it. Yep. Well, so and we won't. I mean, it's just I think one of the reasons is one of my favorites is because it's of course the one I wrote. Well, one of them, but So for those of you who aren't in on the joke there. I can't believe. Lord of the Flies, I think is probably my favorite, because of the psychology. Lord of the Flies.
For me, it's hard to talk about Lord of the Flies without immediately sliding into Animal Farm.
Okay, I was Yes. Because of the way the farm animals sort of degrade into from this, okay, they've got this society, they got the rules, and then they just start to okay, why do you think?
To me, Lord of the Flies is you take just regular people and you plop them in a closed environment, and within a short time, they become tribal and violent. And to me, Animal Farm was kind of the same thing. You have the animals, they establish their utopia, and within a short time, they become tribal and violent. It's an echoing of the same theme. It's from a different perspective, admittedly, but it's the same kind of thing of man's baser instincts tend to win out.
Well, so I guess I see them as fundamentally different because what's happening in I see. I'm going to have to think about that. I've always thought of Lord of the Flies. I've always thought of Lord of the Flies as the return, essentially, to the state of nature, which is you have it's a all war against all. They formed a tribe that's hunting the remaining boys, but and the tribe could turn on anybody in any minute. There's basically almost no law. It's just whoever has got them. Might makes right, and it's all of society has just civilization has completely obliterated. In Animal Farm, that's not exactly what's happened. It's the smart, so-called smarter animals, or the pigs, ended up turning into the humans themselves. They turned into the very system that they were trying to overthrow. So there was still an establishment of power. There was still an established system, and there was still a civilization. It's just it fundamentally changed from it actually reverted back to what it had originally been at the beginning of the book, which was essentially an authoritarian regime where the human beings.
Farmer Brown doing whatever he wanted, and now you have all pigs are created equal, and some are more equal than others.
But there was still also in that there was even still a buy-in to the system, right? There was still a system. The horse bought into the system. There was no system in Lord of the Flies by the end. It was just whatever the leader says goes, and he's just making it up as he goes along.
But to me, that's kind of the point: is that the leader, be it an individual or be it the ruling council of pigs or whatever they were called, the leader basically makes the decisions for everyone, and pretty much everybody nods their head vigorously and says, "Oh, he is so brilliant. We've got to listen to him and obey him." And you get one or two people who question the great leader or oppose him, and they are dealt with swiftly.
Yeah, I know. I think that part is very much true. For me, I always liked 1984 better than Animal Farm, and I think Animal Farm had more subtlety to it. I think there was perhaps more that it was saying, but I liked the world building in 1984 more, and I liked again, I like the psychological aspect to it. I think that's for me.
Yeah, and I think the difference there is in 84, it's less about, for lack of a better way of stating it, man's inhumanity to man, than it is about the fact that you can compel any person through psychological and or physical torture to betray everything that they've ever believed in. And that was, to me, the message of 1984, is that with a big enough lie, people will believe the lie.
Well, I gotta try to think. I think for me that was a huge part of it. I think for me too it was that any kind of manipulation, the fact that there was always a war, whether it was with Eurasia or East Asia, there was always a war. and you actually had to be changing it. You couldn't keep it the same, or else people could then start to wrap their head around it and start to realize that the whole thing is fake. Things have to be changing.
It's the whole chaos theory thing. It's arguably what the GOP is trying to do today by creating as much chaos and frustration and constantly keeping it going that people haven't got time to sit down and think, hey, wait a minute, what if we did it this way? Everything would be great. You're just reacting to the latest insanity du jour.
Well, exactly. All right, so that's why there's always a shortage of some kind. There has to be a shortage, and the shortage has to change so that people are constantly trying to it's funny. I'm curious to know what the difference is between that and, on a ship. There's my father used to talk about like the old Navy ships in the 1700s. And he's like, they'll have you washing the deck all the time. The deck is perfectly clean. They don't need to wash it again. But idle hands, if you're not doing something, you're going to start thinking about mutiny. You're going to start thinking, and they pretend it's productive. It's not really, but they had to keep people busy all the time. I don't know if that's just, is there any truth to that, or is that, no, there's, okay, well,
there is truth to the whole concept of idle hands. But the holostoning of the decks actually had a practical purpose to it.
Okay.
It wasn't just make work. It's because when you have wood exposed out in the sun and to the weather and the sea spray and the salt and everything, it tends to create little cracks in it. And if you get into a battle and that deck gets hit with shell fire, it will splinter. The vast majority of casualties during the age of sail were not because you got hit with a big iron ball. It's because when the big iron ball hit your ship, the wood turned into 1,000 shards flying, razor sharp shards flying through the ship at the same speed that projectile hit the ship. So by holystoning the decks, you minimize to some degree the amount of fragmentation that would occur when the deck was hit.
Did that also, now, as I understand it, I read somewhere, that could be dead wrong about this, that by keeping the deck wet, the wood would keep from contracting, because it would contract if it was dried. It would expand when it was wet, so that would actually help seal the deck.
Possibly.
It sounds good.
No, I know it sounds good. The thing is, you're not so much worried about water coming in through the deck up above.
Yeah.
You're worried about water coming in through the hull, and the water that the hull is in it's always wet in that water. And the boards really didn't have that much seepage. What they used was, I can't remember the name for it, but basically it's a kind of caulk. It's the manila hemp fiber mixed with tar, and they jammed that in between the boards that constituted the hull. And that stuff would swell up, and it would seal that portion of the hull so you didn't get water leakage. Now, that's not to say there wasn't water coming in, particularly as a ship got older, you've got more marine creature intrusion into the wood of the hull, and you'd get smaller leaks becoming larger leaks. And in some cases, because some of these ships remained in service for close to 100 years, by the end of their service life, they were literally so rotten that if you wanted to scuttle the ship, you didn't need to go down and set fire to the magazine to blow the shit up. You literally just walked down there and jammed your fist through the hull. The wood would just pulp.
I wouldn't want to go to sea with a hull that was that fragile. Wow.
You think?
No, I'm not in the Navy. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but Oh, dear Lord.
That's one of the reasons people were very happy when we went to metal ships.
No.
Of course, those had their own problems.
So, all right. So let's see. So we've got 1984, and I like that too, just because it's sort of I remember reading it in high school, and everybody said, "Oh, something like this could never happen." And I was just like, "Yeah, this is closer to historical document than This was what Orwell was seeing Stalin do. This wasn't. He wasn't making this up whole cloth." And then
what happened in 2015, 2016, and the next thing you know, boom, we're in 1984.
And then with the Lord of the Flies, it's just I've seen a lot of books that have in it somewhere society breaks down or something like that. I'd never seen it so realistic as in Lord of the Flies. It really, you saw this sort of incremental thing, but it made a lot of sense, and it was very hard to see how any one decision could have been made all that differently than it was, but you could just see them getting down to that path where they ended up.
I think, to me, what made Lord of the Flies so good is that it was so easily accessible and understandable, even to people who weren't particularly literarily inclined. And when I was in high school, you had the kids that they'd read the 2 books that were assigned for that semester, and that was the last time they ever opened a book. And the fact that they were able to get that, read it, and it immediately made perfect sense to them of what it was trying to convey, I think was one of its biggest standpoints. It conveyed its message without beating you over the head with the message. It made you aware of just, this is the way things happen.
So let's see. So for you, it was the Tolkien trilogy. What else was another book that you were a big fan of?
Let's see. I will confess the heinous sin. I like Shakespeare.
Oh, what's wrong? What?
Everybody else in high school were compelled to read one Shakespearean play at each level. You had to read Romeo and Juliet the first year, and the next year you had to read Macbeth, and so on. And to me, it was like, okay, I'm finished with that. I'm going to read Richard III. Now I'm going to read Henry V. And I really enjoyed the way it spoke to me. I like the archaic wording and trying to puzzle out what they were trying to say at certain points, because it was not obvious. So it was kind of a game in reading.
I was that kid in high school. I could read it and understand it, which most of the kids in high school really couldn't do. They had to struggle with it. But so my father practiced law in 6 languages.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was exposed to languages all the time, and it turned out I can pick up languages reasonably easily. And when I was in high school, I was studying Russian, Spanish, and Japanese. I was taking a college course in Japanese, and so languages came intuitively. I could get them. I never had any difficulty whatsoever with the language of Shakespeare. It struck me as actually, humble brag, I guess, rather intuitive. I could get it, but I didn't get. There was something about it. Just didn't. I read it and I was like, okay, I read the book or I read the play, yada yada yada. It probably wasn't until my sophomore year in college, maybe a little later, that I started to actually really appreciate Shakespeare and what he was doing with the language. And yeah, after that, I love watching the movies. Any good Shakespeare movie, Much Ado About Nothing is one of my favorites. Didn't entirely
one
do
of the
justice.
things I like is looking at particularly the historical ones within the context of what is actually occurring in England at that period, and realizing that in many cases these plays are being written for specific patrons to make them happy, and what is portrayed as history may well be a complete fabrication. Richard III is a perfect case of that. And it's demonizing Richard because he's the last of the Yorkists, and Tudor, who Elizabeth is, the product of the Tudors. The Tudors' claim is kind of shaky at best, so using those plays to convey the message that, oh, those horrible Yorkists, aren't you glad we have these wonderful and upstanding Tudors who have saved us all? They trace back to these honorable Lancastrians who've done so well for us. And when you learn the history behind the plays, it's a very interesting story.
I think a lot of the plays are misunderstood. I have a very different take on Romeo and Juliet. I don't think it was about true love. I think it was mocking teenagers.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it was about
kids.
Yeah. And one of the
I'll bring this up that I thought was hilarious.
Okay.
Is there is a little game, very quick playing card game about Romeo and Juliet. It's called Council of Verona.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the characters on those cards is Desdemona. Or is that the name? No, Rosalind, I'm sorry.
Rosalind. Yes.
The character who is mentioned in like the first scene, maybe even the first couple of lines of the play, and then disappears forever. Because, well, she was the girlfriend du jour. Now I've got Juliet that I'm going to moon over. And
yes,
the whole scoring system is, if you can get Romeo and Juliet together at the end, you can potentially get big points. But you can also bet on Rosalind, because if you have her in play and you can keep Romeo and Juliet apart, you get big points for being in Rosalind's camp.
Well, and he Romeo is opining on Rosalind, and he's crying his ass off, and his tears augment the morning dew, the whole 9 yards. And he talks about how she is the single most important thing ever to have come into his life. And hi there, Juliet just comes in, and it's just sort of like, and then boom, and he almost echoes.
Those walking past.
He echoes the what is it? He echoes what he says to Juliet when they first start courting, the same that he had said of Rosalind. So it's just sort of like, wait,
Where have I heard this before?
And then
at the end, this whole, I can kill myself. I'll come back tomorrow morning. I am young and full of life and vibrant, and suicide doesn't really matter. It's the same, and you see that with teenage kids doing really stupid pranks or whatever on each other or on themselves, fully convinced of their own invulnerability. And then it's a comment on that too. I agree with you. I don't think it's a romance story, and that's unfortunately how most people have it portrayed to them. I think it's something much deeper than that.
Oh God, now I want to get into. There's like 20 things I want to hit. Don't let me end before we talk about common knowledge, because it's common knowledge that it's a love story, and of course it's not. But the other, let's see, there was the I wanted to talk about Much Ado, but now I spaced what I wanted to say about that. I love Much Ado. Much Ado is, and the Kevin Branagh version, I really like. I think it could have. Yes. It could have, but I love that one. I used to watch that one over and over. I actually still have the music. In fact, I like the music so much. Well, we change the standing by music every now and then. It's actually loaded into the standing by in case I ever want to play that music, because I just love the music. And Emma Thompson was she killed it. She was the best of all of them in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That was, so you really want to cause trouble. A friend of mine on Twitter she's actually been on the show a couple of times, but she mentioned a Shakespeare play, and I just decided, oh, what the hey? So from then on, for the entire thread, I spoke in nothing but Shakespeare quotes on Twitter. It caused some confusion. It took a while till somebody's like, wait a minute, I know that line. Oh, you want to troll people? Do Shakespeare quotes on Twitter for, but in context, it.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I used to like to do is people would be posting silly stuff and somebody'd start a, rhyming poetry couplets or something. And then I would go and take some famous scene out of Shakespeare and rewrite it, changing the words to make it pertinent to whatever the discussion at large was, but still have it done in such a way that you could recognize which scene from Shakespeare this was taken from. And people kept telling me, oh, you need to write a play. It's a mock Shakespeare play. No, this is just too much fun doing it this way. It's easy.
If he was a dog that howled thusly, they'd have hanged him. Oh, yeah. It's amazing how much he influenced language, and whether or not he actually existed, which is a whole other thing. So common. I was getting into this because I'm still flirting with the idea of trying to get back into debates. I don't know. There's the only debating forum there is on YouTube right now that I know of is Modern Day Debates. I used to do that a bunch of times. They've invited me back a few times. It's not necessarily my cup of tea for any number of reasons. So we'll see. And right now I've been so swamped anyway, and I prepare for my debates. I'll show you one with S.J. Thomas and I did, but that was 2 weeks prep time. It paid off, but so I'd been having it wasn't a debate, but it was a tense discussion with somebody, and they had said, well, everybody knows this, common knowledge. Okay. Common knowledge. In the summer, well, let's start winter. Do days get longer in the winter, or do they get shorter in the winter? Most people get this wrong. 95% of the people who answer this question get it wrong. Days get longer in the winter. Every day in the winter is longer than the previous day. Days do not get shorter in the winter, they get longer. Period. End of discussion. There's any number of reasons.
Days, how are you defining that? Are you talking daylight?
Yeah, days get longer.
The duration of the period of the day.
No, there's a longer daylight in every day in the winter than there was the previous.
Oh.
And there's any number of reasons why people, if you doubt it, everyone says, oh, days get shorter in the winter. Yeah, that's teachers teach that in high school. I know because I've taught high school. It's like that's fucking wrong. It's just not even close to right. Google at some point shortest day of the year. What's the shortest day of the year? It's usually between December 20th and December 24th.
Yeah, it's the winter solstice.
Yeah, which is also the first day of winter.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
The winter solstice is by definition.
You are correct.
Yeah,
right. And then days are starting to get longer then.
Yeah. So this, it's common knowledge. Yeah, except everybody says days get longer in the winter or shorter in the winter, and they get longer.
There's so many things like that apply to that people just. It's common knowledge, because idiots think it's right.
Well, it's we've talked about this on the show before too, and it's one of the most interesting things about human psychology, which is we think our brains are really geared to get accurate information. No, our brains are wired for efficiency, getting the closest to correct answer in the shortest period of time. That's what they do. Accuracy is a whole another ballgame. You have to train yourself to get more accurate, and that I've seen there's no amount of training that can overcome. You'll always have biases coming in somewhere, and you can try to account for them, but since the same biases are embedded in the same tools that you're using to account for them in the first place, it's not as it's not as easy to do as you would hope. In fact, it's probably an exercise in futility.
Yeah. So let's see, other books that I like.
Yeah.
Pretty much anything by 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜.
I don't recognize that name.
He got his start as the person hired by the Tolkien estate to take all of the Doctor's huge pile of notes that he had compiled over his entire career about fantasy novel stuff that he was writing. And Kay was hired to compile that into various books. So the Silmarillion, while it's credited to Tolkien, is actually realistically written or excerpted, if you wanted, from notes that Tolkien had made by Kay. And that includes all the other half dozen books that were published under Tolkien's byline, when in fact it was kind of compiled and written by Kay. After that, and actually as he was doing it, he was also writing a whole series of novels. And they're the most almost dreamlike and lyrical style of writing that I've ever come across. I just love reading his stuff, and it transports you into most of his most recent novels, and that's probably 15, maybe more, maybe even 20 novels. They're in a fictitious version of Earth. So it's a setting, say, in Renaissance Italy, or it's a setting in Han Dynasty China. And you can see all the elements that come from that culture that he's writing in, but it's not the same. It's just a little bit enough different that you know it's another world. And it's good enough that in some cases I've read a book and said, the setting for this is Provence. I've never been to Provence. Based on just this one novel, I want to go and spend a week or two in Provence, because it's that captivating the way he writes about the place.
I felt the same way reading Garden of Eden by Hemingway. That wasn't Venice, but
not
that was
one
somewhere.
I have read. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it.
That was oh dear Lord, I forget where that was. That was somewhere in the area of Venice, but it wasn't Venice. But I just remember, and he had described, they did the fishing, the marlin fishing, and he had one of the most beautiful lines I'd ever seen. The guy casts the line out, and he's letting it, he's letting it come in and doesn't catch anything, and just for a moment, the line is hovering, and there's just a drop of water coming on. And the way he describes it was actually that one line reminded me of Melville when Ahab is crying into the ocean, and one tear falls into the ocean. It said, there had not been so much sadness or pain in the entire ocean as there had been in that one drop, the one tear, as he's looking out over the deck of the ship into the water. The Pequot, was it? Yeah, I think it was the Pequot. No, the Pequot was the one that picked him up.
Pequod, I thought, was the name of it.
Pequot, yep. So, let's see that I will confess I skimmed. when Melville is talking about how to do every knot in the.
So somebody once told me, if you want to read Moby Dick, you read the first 3 chapters and the last 3 chapters. the entire middle of the book is nothing more than a documentary on the whaling industry at the time.
Yeah.
In painful detail. There's no story. It's
what was the other? What was? Oh, you do know? I think there was a. Oh God, this is devastating in some ways. This is the Hemingway entered a contest for short fiction, 6 words, and he won. Was the story he wrote was Baby Shoes for Sale, Never Worn.
Yeah,
that was yeah. And then the other one, this was because of the dyslexia. It's rare that I get into something. Okay, so these are all straight up legit books,
Okay.
But there was a time, and this was like right after college. I don't know why. I thought like I needed the real fancy things, like because it makes you look smart, I guess. So I ended up getting a whole bunch of these, and I've still kept them because I don't want to toss them. I don't know what to do with them, so I got them out of the attic and put them in for the set, So it's just like, oh, I got all these books, but I've read most of these.
So sophisticated.
Exactly right. So this one was Crime and Punishment, which is another one. I like the psychological ones, and I think what blows my mind about Dostoevsky and Orwell. Did Orwell write in Russian? Do you know? Did he write in Russian or in English?
No, I don't. He wrote in English. He's British.
Okay.
I don't know if he spoke Russian or not. So.
Why did I think that? I don't know. Okay. Dostoevsky wrote in Russian. So you have to,
yes.
And I can't. I mean, and my Russian. You've seen me read Russian. I found a letter I had written in Russian, and it's in cursive. I can't read. It's really weird seeing your own handwriting and not being able to read it.
Not being able to figure out what you.
I have no idea what I'm saying. It's been that long, and when we've got Starsky on, if I end up reading it in the live chat, I want to sit down. I still got like some of my Russian books here and all this. I want to, like, part of it's like, but it's like there's 3 million things I want to do. Right, everything's at the cost of something. But so I can
read like 2 or 3 Russian novels, but I remember I was talking to some Russian guy, and I mentioned that I'd read whatever it was, Quiet Flows the Dawn. And he was just thunderstruck that I'd even heard of it, let alone that I'd read it. I said, why? It's a book. It interested me because it's basically about World War I. Well, it's one of our great novels and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, okay, great, dude. Whatever.
There was, and I read... Now, this is not great literature, but it was very creative. It was really well done. I read the original Night Watch book, and then I saw the movie, which I think made an effort to stick with the lore. They had to like take a lot of separate stories and kind of combine them because the Night Watch and Day Watch. But it was immensely creative. Do you know what those are? If you're nodding, so I assume.
Yeah, I finally figured out what you were talking about when you said Day Watch. Then I knew what it was. Yeah, and I've read both of those.
Yeah,
translations.
Yeah, those were the writing was not particularly great. What blows my mind about Dostoevsky is that the writing translates into English beautifully. You're just like, oh my God, He uses language so well. This isn't even the language it was written in.
Well, you had a very good translator, is what you had.
Yeah, fair.
And I think that's true of a lot of things, where you get stories that are written in a not English language, and it can be a really great story, but if you have a bad translator, the story really doesn't come across as particularly compelling or interesting. Whereas the flip, which is if it's a bad story but you have a good translator, is not true. You can tell a bad story as a bad story, but it's pretty hard to convey a really good story unless you have somebody that knows how to take the nuances of language and make them work in the other language.
Yes. Which I did some translation work at a summer camp once, and the director would always be sitting there going, "You have to translate everything I say literally." I was like, "You can't do that in Russian for any number of reasons." And I remember he said some sentence, and it came out to only about 3 words in Russian. And he got pissed because the sentence was like 7 or 8 words. He's like, "Oh, this can't be a literal translation." I was like, "Yeah, it's actually really close because they don't have the verb to be in the present tense. So there's no I am, you are. It doesn't exist in Russian. So you can take out all you can take that out of. In fact, you kind of have to take it out of the indefinite articles. There's no the in Russian. By the time you declinate and conjugate in Russian, you can say the same thing using usually less than half the words. The declination takes care of the nouns. The conjugation takes care of the verbs. And, you've oh, dear Lord. But it's one reason why it's such a nightmare to learn. But why on earth was I getting into the... Oh, it's so complicated. I mean, the basic translation from one to another is that hard. But, yeah, the nuances, that takes genuine talent, I think. That's one of those, other people can do it or they can't.
And then, of course, there's German, where you can take an entire paragraph from English and condense it into a single word in German.
What? This I hadn't heard.
Oh, because they take those words and they just kind of jam them all together with, the thing that goes fast on wheels on Sundays. And everybody knows what it means, but it's one word.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of other languages that have the I forget what the French word is for the idea at the stairwell, which is it's the George Costanza thing. You walk out and then you realize the perfect comeback, but you're already at the stairs. You're leaving. You blew it. There's a word for that, I think, in French. And there's all these interesting words. The Schadenfreude, of course. There are these words that don't really exist in English. They have to be lent into the language.
Straight over.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, oy vey. I find the older I get, the more I turn into an old Jewish woman. I've been doing a lot of the oy vey, or the that's fakakta. I'm sure I'm brutalizing, but I'm
Sacha Mashoga.
Oh dear Lord. Okay.
I remember my father, when he was learning Turkish, saying he thought Turkish would be the perfect language to get computers to speak in.
Really?
Because, it doesn't really have irregular verbs. It's very, very structured and rigid, and everybody knows exactly how things are supposed to be said in it, as opposed to English, where there's like 19 ways to say the same thing, even using the same set of words, just how you arrange them and where you put the commas, kind of thing.
Yeah, my father always wanted me to learn Esperanto for that reason, and I was just like, no. Oh, dear Lord.
I had a friend that spoke Esperanto, and he said it was the strangest thing. Is he was in an airport, and I don't remember what country it was in, and some poor person was just trying to explain to, like the security guard or something, what they were trying to get across. And the person didn't speak the language of the country. The security guard didn't speak whatever language this person was speaking. My friend didn't speak either of the languages. And then just out of the blue, for some reason, he says something in Esperanto. And the woman who's talking, "Oh, you speak Esperanto," and just blam. It's like, oh, you found the other one Esperanto speaker in the entire country. There they are.
At the same summer camp, they had 16 Japanese kids who were there, and I was asked to try to work with them and get them integrated into the camp. And they had a translator, so I thought this was going to be easy. Turns out the translator was not for English. There had been a confusion somewhere, so he didn't speak English. Nobody could talk to him, and so for the first couple of days, everybody was getting really frustrated, and the kids were starting to really push the boundaries of what they could do at this camp because they could just claim that they didn't, speak English. And then one day, I'm at lunch, and the translator and I were always eating lunch together, and the reason was we hadn't said one word to each other, but we were both in the same position. His job was to help them communicate with the camp, and he couldn't do it, so he was disappointed and frustrated, and my job was to help them integrate, and I couldn't do it. So we're sitting down, and he sits down and goes, "Я не знаю, что делать." This is Russian. I don't know what to do. And I was just like, "Что? Что? Говорите ли вы по-русски?" "Да, я провидицу." "You're a Russian,
Suddenly, everything was clear.
Everything was. It was the easiest to understand Russian I had ever heard in my life. It was just so, because he wasn't native, I don't know, it was just so easy to understand. It was gorgeous. But then you had to have both of us there. So if you wanted to talk to the Japanese kids, you could do it. But I'd have to translate to the director again. The director was like,
Russian to Japanese. Oh,
yes.
Brother.
And then the director again was like, "Are you saying this literally?" I was like, "Are you shitting me?" I was like, "This is going from English to Russian to Japanese and back. You're
Just
lucky.
take it for what it is and live with it."
You're lucky I haven't offended like his ancestors and said I'm going to piss on the ashes of your. I don't know what the hell we're saying." Oh,
That's great. That's a good one. That's a good story.
Oh, and he lit up. He lit up because the Japanese culture. There's nothing worse than sucking at your job and not being able to do it. And he lit up. All of a sudden, he was needed. He was. Oh,
I'm redeemed.
Exactly. Well, the camp director again. This was actually an international summer camp. It had kids. He comes by and goes, "Nick, I didn't realize you spoke Japanese." I was like, "It's Russian. It's just okay. Just never mind. Never mind. We're talking. We're good. We're all good."
Oh, that's great.
Oh my God. So there was another. You had talked about translators, but it got me thinking about editing. And there's something I learned not that long ago, which blew my mind. Star Wars was one of the worst movies ever made. Star Wars sucked as a movie, and I didn't know that because I saw it and I really liked it. Turns out, the first draft was panned by everybody who saw it. Everybody hated it, and it sucked. And 3 editors, including George Lucas's wife and 2 others, who won the only Oscar that this thing won was for editing, and it was the editing that saved it. The editing completely saved the movie. They changed everything. They reintroduced how Luke came in. Luke originally came in. He was whining. He was actually at the converters and talking with a really stupid robot. And then he sees the droids coming in. And they have all this footage. And I'm looking at this going, oh, my God, none of this stuff. And all this rambling stuff. But the biggest change that his wife made was in the final scene. They figured out how to blow up the Death Star, and there was all this extra dialogue with Vader and Obi-Wan in their final battle, which made no sense, and it was just this rambling, and it was like, "You used to be the master, but I will always be your master because as a Jedi," and it was just terrible. And you listen to this, you're like, "This is the worst dialogue I've ever seen."
Oh yeah.
In the final scene, the rebels go out and they attack the base, the Death Star, and they just attack it. That's it. And she's sitting there going, "Well, wait, there's nothing really at stake here. If they attack it and lose, they'll just attack it again and keep attacking it." So she re-edited it from old previous footage to have it that the base, that the Death Star was attacking the rebel base. It wasn't shot that way. It wasn't scripted that way. The entire thing got added to it. Yeah, none of that was in there.
That's a huge change.
Yes, and it all had to be done with voiceover work because they couldn't script any. So you don't actually see the actors talking any of the parts about how the rebel base is about to be obliterated.
Interesting.
That was George Lucas's wife did that, and again, just post in editing. So, and then learning, like, and then the, prepare to fire, that line when Tarkin says that line, it's like, that sounds identical to the first time he said it. Yeah, that's because he only ever said it once when they fired and destroyed Alderaan. They were never going to fire it again. It wasn't in the movie that it was going to fire again. It was never in the movie that any of that was going to happen. All of this was, hold on one sec. All right. All of this was, just it was done in the editing room. I was like, talk about saving a movie. So there's a great YouTube video on it. It's called, I think it's called How Editing Saved Star Wars. And they've got all the original footage that got cut. There was just some terrible scenes, terrible dialogue. And they have the original script and they say, okay, here's what was happening, and then here's how they changed all of it. And they turned it from a really terrible sci-fi movie, like one of the B movies. Almost, it was almost Ed Wood bad.
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Yes, that's exactly. It was really almost that bad. And
what was the movie that maybe I'm getting him backwards. I get Spielberg and Lucas mixed up all the time. Who's the one that did the movie about kids in high school on the last day of high school or whatever it is? And they're cruising in their car. Huh?
Oh, Ferris Bueller?
American Graffiti.
Oh, American
Graffiti.
Okay. Yeah. I never actually saw that.
Yeah. I mean, everybody says this great movie and everything, and I saw it and it was like, I won't go so far as to call it junk, but it doesn't appeal to me in the least. And I think if it is Lucas, and I'm pretty sure it is because I think that's where he got his contact with Harrison Ford, is that Harrison had worked on that movie in some tiny little role. And I think that probably is a movie that didn't get edited by his wife.
Well, and there was interviews with her, and apparently everybody in Hollywood knew that the movie sucked, and everybody in Hollywood knew that the movie had been saved by. That's why you have to be an insider to know what the original was to get the award for editing. And the three editors, her and these two other guys, but mainly her, got the award for the Academy Award for Best Editing, and that's why. And
hang on a sec, Sherry. What's the movie with I Sleep Now? Lot's Skeleton of Cadabra. Have you seen that? Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you asking me or you? I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry. What was the question? I thought you were asking Sherry.
Have you seen... Yeah, I wanted to ask Sherry a quick question about a movie. And the movie is Lost Skeleton of Cadabra.
Never even heard of it.
Oh, my God. It is a movie that's made to make fun of Ed Wood type movies. B grade 1950s schlock, but it's a fairly recent movie, and recent, maybe 20 years old. But oh my God, is it hilarious with some of the dumbest lines in the world. And I'm a scientist. Yeah, I'm a scientist. I do science. And they have the lost skeleton is in fact, like somebody's skeleton from high school biology class or whatever, and they use strings to make it move around, right? Except the strings tend to break while they're doing it, and as soon as it breaks and the thing flops down, it goes, "I sleep now," and then they change the scene.
That sounds so familiar.
You've got to see it. It is so damn funny. It is just, it's painfully funny because it is so bad.
we're gonna have to do in time movie recommendations. We'll put it up on the website. I keep looking over here because it's not also. It's like when people ask me for like my top 5 favorite movies, it's like I don't have a list memorized, so I have to reconstruct in my head, and I have to try to remember. But I could think of a few. Love Actually is definitely one I've got. But what was the? Oh dear! Now it's just Stir of Echoes. I thought was a good one. Yeah.
Which one?
There was a movie. It's not in my top 5, but it was much better than I thought it would be. It's subtle in the how and the why that it's better, but it was a movie called Stir of Echoes. It's Kevin Bacon.
Stir of Echoes.
It's Kevin
Never
Bacon.
Heard of it.
He's I forget where he is. I want to say like Boston or someplace like that, but he's like in Southie or some sort of lower middle or middle class suburb. Not suburb. Sorry, it's the it's like a Southie kind of area. And at one night at a party, he his wife's best friend, who they hate each other, they don't get along. His wife's best friend, he learns, is hypnotizing people. He says, "Oh, hypnotize me, do me." She's like, "Okay, sure." So she hypnotizes him to be more open and more receptive to things around him, and all of a sudden, basically, he can see ghosts after that. So it's the Sixth Sense meets, but it's What I liked was it. First of all, it actually really does change him as a person. You get to see how it influences how he interacts with everybody around him. He completely changes his sort of worldview, and he realizes that his son actually already has this, and he was so oblivious he wasn't paying attention to his kid, didn't realize that there was something wrong, and now he's figured it out that he could probably always do this, but he didn't. So it's called Stir of Echoes. I may even have the DVD right over there, but that was a good one. But,
I'll have to see if I can find that. That sounds interesting. Yeah, I like lots of movies. I can't really say anything is my favorite. The only one I will specifically, stand out for, because I will watch reruns of it anytime it's on, is Tora, Tora, Tora.
Yeah.
It's the story of the Pearl Harbor raid.
Oh, okay.
The lead up to it. And I find something new in it every time, not in terms of the acting, which isn't particularly stellar, though it's good, but it's probably the most faithful retelling of the history of everything that led up to that event. And how it proceeded and such, and they do a really good job with it. And every time I'm sitting there going, no, all you have to do, one guy right now, all you have to do is just very simple, make a freaking phone call. No.
the movie Pearl Harbor was I haven't seen it all because it just looked like it sucked so bad. I had no interest in seeing any of it. I've seen a couple of scenes, and I have to admit I did like the bit about the Doolittle raid, which probably didn't belong in the movie if you're talking about but it was just nice to see the Doolittle raid done in kind of this. I mean, it's very
for some reason they extended it past there. I mean, it really ought to. If you're going to call a movie Pearl Harbor, it should stop with Pearl Harbor. It shouldn't go through to the Doolittle raid or the Battle of Midway or anything like that. That should be a separate movie, in my opinion.
Well, as a writer, there's the narrative. It should have. They extended it so they could finish telling their story of whatever. But it was. And I also like the little bits that had Tom Sizemore in it. So I will watch a couple of scenes from that, but I stay away from the rest of the movie.
Well, the thing that bothers me about that one, and there was another one I can't remember that came out recently about more or less the same. I think it was Midway or something. Is that for some reason Hollywood these days feels compelled that you have to put this applique of a love story over historical events, a story that has nothing to do with what the movie's really talking about, but some jackass in the suit in Pasadena is saying, well, if we don't put this in, women will not come and see this movie. Therefore, we're losing 50% of a potential audience. And it's like,
Yep.
but it's so badly done, they're not going to come and see it anyway, you buffoon.
There is a movie that there are a few that like you look at, and in my view, just work of genius. One of them is the movie Adaptation. It's stars Nicolas Cage as what was Charlie. Well, it couldn't have been Charlie Kaufman because Charlie Kaufman was but it was the Kaufman brothers. I forget what their names are, and one of them wrote Being John Malkovich. So it's by the same guy who wrote Being John Malkovich.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it basically here's the plot. So it starts with the set of Being John Malkovich, and
Okay.
they're on the set, and Kaufman, who wrote it, is on the set, and he's watching and he's interacting a little bit, but he's the writer. Writers don't have much to do on a set, and he gets a call, and it's his agent, and she says, "There's somebody here who really wants to see you. They want to do a new movie with you. They want to adapt a book." Like, oh, okay, great. And while it's doing this, it's actually got multiple timelines going on. So now there's another timeline going on. There's a guy, his name is LaRoche. He's stealing orchids, and he's got a genius IQ, so he's able to just do all these incredible things. But he's stealing orchids and selling them, and there's this woman who's sort of taken an interest in him and is writing a book about him. And she writes this book. It's called The Orchid Thief. Now, flash forward back to Kaufman. He's given the book The Orchid Thief. And they say, we want to adapt this to a movie. And he's like, okay, sure, I can do that. And there's no story in it. It's about this guy, but it's mostly like a character sketch of this guy and how and why orchids exist, which is through adaptation. Orchids have adapted to become the way they are. One of the most adaptable things on the planet, actually. So he's sitting there trying to figure out, how am I going to write about this? And finally he decides he's just going to freeform. He's like, okay, I'm going to start at the beginning of time. So he goes, nope, that may be too big a scope for the movie. Okay, let's just start with the beginning of Earth. We have plants, we have dinosaurs, we have a big asteroid. He goes, no, we don't want to start the movie there. So he's trying to figure out where he's going to start the movie. And he says, I know, we're going to start the movie with the writer of the movie is on the set of Being John Malkovich, and he's told that he has to write this book, and he has no idea how he's going to write it. That's where we're going to start the movie. And you realize you are now watching the movie that he wrote as an adaptation of The Orchid Thief.
That's good.
And it's happening on multiple layers, multiple times, all of these things happening, and it's reality and fiction start weaving in and out. But if you're paying attention, they're very good cues as to what you're seeing when. But it is a work of genius. It's up there amongst my favorites. It's probably not my favorite. Inception is one of my favorites, but it's a work of genius. It is an irrefutable work of genius in my view.
Okay, I'll have to look for it then.
Yeah.
So I'll ask this a couple stupid questions here. We'll see what you say.
Before you do, 𝐂𝐚𝐥𝐥, and I don't want to give away anything, but 𝐂𝐚𝐥𝐥 has it right, which is what got me thinking about it was when the guy says, there's no plot here, there's nothing to do this. No, make one up. Put in a love story. It's like, I'm not going to put in a love story. He's like, no, put in a love story. You have to put in a love story. He's like, there are no characters to put a love story. I'm not going to turn this into Hollywood. I will not do that. And his brother is a terrible writer, but that's what he does. And his brother, if you see the trailer, his brother's like, I'm writing a screenplay too, and in it, the bad guy's getting away on a horse, and he's being chased by cops. So it's sort of like technology versus horse. And it was just like, and so he's like, he's going to try to get his brother to, it was an absolutely amazing. If you see the trailer, I haven't given away anything that's not in the trailers. It's a worthwhile. Anyways, okay, so you had a couple questions for me.
Oh, just silly stuff.
Oh, okay.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, for fuck's sake, silly stuff. You realize if I answer that question, I'm going to get murdered by 50% of my modding team. I can't answer that question. I am agnostic on the issue.
There is a correct answer.
Okay, listen. I think they're each different things for different. There are different things to like about them. They're not the same. You can't. It's like comparing apples and oranges. But fine, they're fruit. That's all they have in common. What's the correct answer?
There is a correct answer.
Okay, what is it?
Firefly.
That was a good show. That was an amazing show.
For which everybody at Fox News, or not Fox, but the Fox Network. That was involved, even remotely, in the cancellation of that show, should be disemboweled and throttled with their own entrails.
And the writing on that. And the funny thing was, this is what's really hilarious. My father-in-law is, he lives in New Mexico. You've seen New Mexico on the map. Now, take a look at the size of that state and remember that it has 1/2 the population of New York City. Not the state of New York City. In that area. So
I'm sure there are boroughs in New York City that have more population than Montana.
Yeah. So he and I have basically nothing in common. And when we're over there for like 2 weeks trying to find things to do, and there's not much to do out in New Mexico, they call that the land of entrapment. You know, there just isn't a lot to do. Yeah. So we brought DVDs, and we had DVDs of the entire Firefly, and there was nothing. We could never find anything that they liked and we liked simultaneously. We found 2. The first was The Insider with Al Pacino and Russell Crowe. That was the ABC. They loved that movie. So we found one thing that we liked. Turned out they didn't like 7 with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. I could have told you that, but that wasn't me. They're like, they might like 7, but no, they're not going to like 7. Let's not try 7. We're going to try 7. No, let's not try 7. The other one was Firefly, and we got second or third one through, and my father-in-law couldn't stop watching it. By the end, he's like, "Wait, there are no more." So yeah, there are no more. He's like, "What idiot decided to end that show?" So like, wow. It's like you and I like some. Wow. Okay, so Titan, we don't need an excuse to come out. Yeah, I know, but as soon as I weigh in on the Star Wars or Star Trek thing, but yeah, that's right. The answer is Firefly. Yeah, it gets serious after that. All right, so yeah, that was your first question. Got another?
Oh, I don't even know if I have others, but I just thought that was a great one-liner joke.
That was a good one. I was
I mean, the other thing is a lot of people will, talk about which is your favorite in the Marvel Universe series or whatever. And I kind of go, I'm ambivalent about them all. I'm not a person that likes, and it's hard to express this without using the word, and then it complicates and confuses the issue. I'm not a person who likes superhero movies. And I don't mean superhero as in the guy with the cape who can fly and you can shoot him and the bullets bounce off. It's the same reason I'm not particularly as fond of Star Wars as I am Star Trek. They're both good within their own right, but the reason I typically prefer Star Trek better is because it's what I call a team building thing. You have a bunch of people who individually may be competent, but the synergy of them with their co-workers makes them unstoppable, as opposed to Star Wars. It's all about waiting for Godot. Oh, he has the Force. He will save us now. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And that's one of the reasons, as much as it's a joke, I like Firefly so much, because no one individual on that ship was anywhere near as great as all of them together.
That's a really good,
yeah.
There was all my favorite TV shows get canceled. The ones that I like. I was a huge fan of The Newsroom. Big shock. Studio 60, which I got the poster of back there, which was both of those were Aaron Sorkin, and Studio 60.
I don't think I ever saw Studio 60.
It was Sorkin likes to do behind the scenes shows. That's most of his are behind the scenes at the West Wing, behind the scenes of a newsroom. This was behind the scenes of a. This was behind the scenes of a Saturday Night Live kind of show. It's a comedy show. The two people who are the center of the show is the executive producer and the head writer. And for me, he very accurately captured the difficulties in writing. Mark Twain said that the definition of a writer is somebody who has great difficulty writing. And it captures the angst of, I think, artists in general very, very well. It's also about art versus commerce. In fact, in the pilot episode, the current producer,
a writer as opposed to a screenwriter.
Well, any kind of I think it applies to any kind of artistic endeavor. At the beginning of in the pilot episode, they're doing a show, and it's a Saturday Night Live show, so they're airing their thing live, and the producer just loses it, and he goes out and he steps out and says, "Listen, you're about to see us do a sketch with Dick Cheney and Bush, and it's a sketch you've seen 1,000 times before. We're making fun of the fact that George Bush is an idiot. You know that. We know that. Nothing here is original." So we had to stop doing original stuff because the studio said that they wanted us to start courting 12-year-old boys to watch this show, and not the smart ones, the dumb ones. So and he does this live. He of course gets fired, then they have to replace him. But that's kind of what the show is about: is the struggle between art and commerce. You've got the people on the show, the actors who want to do a good show. You've got the writer who it's supposed to be satire. Well, you have to satire the establishment if you're going to be a genuine satire. You have to be able to satire the president. You have to be able to satire the government. You have to be able to satire, And at this point in the show, nobody wants to be seen as unpatriotic, so they don't want to, do that, and they don't want to take any risks. And so it's sort of like, okay, that's it. That's where the tension of the show is what risks do we take and which ones.
Pablum.
Yeah. So it was, but then one of my favorite TV shows, and it's so dated. It's so dated, but I thought the plot was amazing. It was called Airwolf. It was this attack helicopter, Jan Michael Vincent or Ernest Borgnine. Basic plot of it was, and this only lasted for a year before they said, okay, you got to lighten it up. That Millennium, which I really liked, Millennium was a really dark one with Lance Hendrickson. But the Airwolf was it's a pilot for the super attack helicopter thing, and those were big in the 80s. And he quits the program, but he was the best pilot for it. And then the guy who designed it was also a pilot for it, ends up stealing it, starts, attacking and, using it for terrorism, so on and so forth. So the agency that built it contacts the original pilot and says, would you see if you could steal it back? You're the only guy who can fly it. He says, okay, but he lost his brother in Vietnam. He said, find out what happened to my brother. If you guys can find him, either dead or alive, figure out what happened to him, that'll be the deal. He ends up getting the helicopter back, but then he steals it and says, I'm not giving it back to you until I find out about my brother. I said, look, he's probably dead. Nobody knows. We can't find him. And so they end up stuck in this position where he's got this helicopter that he does not want. So you've got this hero in the super helicopter thing, which there was a lot of, but in this case, he didn't want it. He hated technology. He was living in a cabin in a lake in the middle of the mountains. He hated people, didn't want to be anywhere, and didn't want to fly the thing. But he's the only one who could do it. He's stolen it. The agency that built it wants it back, so they're going to try to get it back from him, but they're also tipping him off when other agencies are trying to get it back because they don't want anyone else to get it, and because if they're nice to him, he'll fly on occasion for them. So he'll fly for them, they'll keep looking for his brother while trying to steal it back. So in this case, all his friends are his friends only this far, and they're all trying to get him in one way or another. And he wants to give it to him. He doesn't want it, and he doesn't care who's got it. But as long as he's got it, they have to look for his brother. That's all he cares about, and that's the plot. So all the good guys are also antagonists in the show, and it was very well done, I thought.
Interesting. I've never heard of the show before. I was thinking maybe it was something that came out when I was overseas, but you said it was in the 80s, so it was back in the U.S., either in college or in the military at the time.
And it was a dark show for the time. A lot of what they did was really pushing the envelope, and they were told to liven it up and or lighten it up, and they did. And then you know what they were told next. They needed a love story. So they added a female helicopter pilot that would then be and it didn't need it. It worked better. Yeah. So, but that, and then Millennium was another one. I was writing a book sort of on characters that I'd been inspired by from Millennium, but that's a guy who sees angels and demons, and he's a detective, but the way he solves crimes is he sees angels and demons doing things, and at first he thinks it's all metaphor, and then it turns out no, they're real, and they're not pleased with him, and that was an interesting one too. So, but that was pretty dark, and that was one of the things
I was going to say, not that I like all of them, but some of the Star Wars spin-off series, I like the concept of taking minor characters from a popular franchise and letting them have their own story, so to speak. Because they're fascinating minor characters that you kind of, that's an interesting thing, and you never see them again in the series. But I like the idea of being able to say, okay, we're going to explore this other character in a separate thing. And I'm trying to remember, there's a series of books that's kind of that way, where they take characters from some other well-known book, some novel, and do spin-offs of those characters. I wish I could remember the name of the author who did a series of spin-offs of Frank Baum's Wizard of Oz series. And he turns everything on its head. If you've ever seen the musical Wicked, that was the first book in that series. So he wrote that book from the perspective of the Wicked Witch, and then wrote, I think, 3 or 4 other novels in that series where he took some other secondary character from Baum's world and writes an entire novel on them. So there's one about the Cowardly Lion, for example. That's the only other one I can remember off the top of my head. Yeah, and it's an interesting concept, and I like it because it's the imagination of somebody else looking at another person's work and saying, I can take this and make it something unique and my own, but still to some extent remain true to what the original was. And it's also because it allows you to explore other very fascinating characters who otherwise are nothing, because there's no story ever told about them. So I just thought that was an interesting.
Did you ever see Dunkirk?
Yeah, the movie.
What were your thoughts on that one?
There were elements of it that I wish had gotten a little more play, but generally speaking, I think it was an excellent movie. I know a lot of people didn't like it because it was really hard to follow the storyline because it kept shifting perspectives back and forth between, I think there were 4, maybe 5 main character plot lines, and they interwove. So sometimes you wouldn't get a character's perspective of a certain moment from his perspective, even though it was his primary plot line. It's somebody else observing what he's doing. I like the concept. The implementation, I think, was a little too disjointed for a mainstream audience.
And we're gonna need to start wrapping up reasonably soon, but so
Okay, no
I
problem.
have two remaining movies since we're on Nolan, and I wanted to ask because
Sure.
two of my favorite movies are Inception and Memento, and I was curious about your views on those if you've seen them.
I've seen Inception. I have not seen Memento. I liked Inception. I kind of had the same criticism of it that I did just now about the Dunkirk movie, which is that the way some of the storylines intertwine gets confusing for people. I don't think I was confused by it. I understood pretty well what was going on in the movie, but I like a movie that's more accessible to a general audience, because then everybody can kind of share in the experience and understand what the message that's trying to be conveyed is. And if you kind of turn it into a form of Gnosticism where only the specially anointed understand the secrets, I think it loses a lot in the translation.
That makes sense. Memento, or not Memento. Yeah, Inception. I don't know. I huge fan of that one. And then Memento, it's also Chris Nolan. That's an interesting one because it happens in reverse. So the very first scene in the movie is the last scene to happen chronologically. And here's how and why. So you know what Korsakoff's syndrome is?
No.
It's when you can't encode long-term memories. They call it short-term memory loss. It's not short-term. Your short-term memory is fine. You can't encode new long-term memories, so you only have your short-term memory.
I see.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. So the first guy who got it, he was a Russian, Korsakoff. He got it from
50
alcohol.
First Dates.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. You got it. Well, so this guy is trying to solve the murder of his wife, but he's got Korsakoff's. So what he's been able to do is by rote train himself, like my car is, he carries a Polaroid camera with him. My car is in my left pocket, so he pulls out his left pocket and he sees a Polaroid of his car and he knows that's his car, so he has to find it. He's like, oh, there's my car. And so he's constantly writing things down, and important things he's getting tattoos of, but his working memory is really only about 2 minutes tops. And so he is trying to solve, he got this condition when he and his wife were attacked. A burglar attacked them, he got hit in the head, his wife was murdered. He's trying to solve her murder, and this is but he's got this obviously strong limitation. The first scene in the movie, he's walking, he's following a guy, he takes out a Polaroid. The Polaroid is of the guy, and it says, "This is the one, kill him." And it's in his own handwriting because he's learned to recognize his own handwriting. So he realizes, oh, I found the guy who murdered my wife. Takes out a gun, kills the guy, boom. So that's it. That's the first scene in the movie. He's killed, he's avenged his wife. The next scene you see is the scene right before that. He arrives at the warehouse with the guy, he's talking with the guy real friendly, and then he's looking at other notes. He says, oh, I'm going here. Why am I going here? Ooh, the guy who murdered my wife is here. I'm going to meet him here, I guess. Okay, great. And then he writes a note. Oh, it's this guy. Takes a picture. Says, yeah, hold on a sec. Writes it down. Boom. So every scene is the scene prior. But what it's done is it's given you Korsakoff's, because at any given moment you have no idea how he got to where he is. You know what's going to happen.
Oh, wow.
You have no idea how he got there. So
that is cool.
And what you realize about halfway through is there's a very distinct possibility he got the wrong person, because while he's actually very good at collating the data and doing all this other stuff, there are people that know what he's doing and are deliberately trying to throw him off. So A, did he kill the right person? And if it wasn't, who got him to kill the wrong one and why. But you're not going to know that until the final scene in the movie, which is the very first scene to actually happen in chronological order.
Fascinating.
But so there's this great scene though. It just starts with he's sitting on a toilet. He's fully clothed, but he's sitting on a toilet and he's got a bottle of vodka. And he's like, I don't feel drunk. I was what? Oh, this has got to be my you know what? I should shower. So he goes and showers, and while he's showering, a guy shows up and goes, "Who are you?" And boom, they fight, and he's naked, and he's like, he was there to mug the guy. He had broken into that guy's hotel room, and he was going to write it down, but he got distracted, so he forgot why he was there. But you're not going to figure that out until the next scene. So,
oh, that's great. Yeah,
so
now I'm definitely going to have to hunt that one down.
It's called Memento. It's Guy Pearce. He is great in it, and it's really, really good. But it also does the same thing. It's got a tiny thread intermittently of black and white scenes, which are going forward in time, and they start from before the movie, and then the black and white and the color scenes, boom, mix at one point, and then you're here right now. It is chronologically the very first scene to happen, but it's the last scene in the movie where you figure out, did he get the right person, and if not, why not? So, yeah.
Well,
Oh yeah, L.A. Confidential was really good too. Jesus, a lot of great movies. All right, I'm going. This was a great conversation. We'll have to have you again next week. If you know, what are you doing next week? You up for coming back? You know.
Good question. What am I doing next week? Looks like it's clear.
Perfect. Well then, you know, if we can fit you in, we'll get you in. And then Starsky. So tomorrow.
Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, let me just real quick for everybody. Tomorrow, Operator Starsky, for the audience, so you guys know, he's a Ukrainian National Guardsman. We talk to him once a week, every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern. That will also be on both channels for now. Again, we're going to be maneuvering the channels around a bit, making some changes. We'll talk a bit more about that, especially on our Patreon Hangout. We'll be discussing that for people who are interested, but that notwithstanding, it's always great to talk to Starsky. Commander McMillan will be there. 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿 should be there, so that will be a great show. Come join us on the Discord, and you can learn more about what we do, the conversations we have, and look forward to, and the news, which we are going to be catching up on with Starsky and on our rundown next week. But in the meantime, thank you all for joining us. Commander Lance, thank you once again for coming on. It was a delightful conversation, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, good sir.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Have a good night all.